Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. Chad's been doing all kinds of racing here lately, been pavement racing, dirt racing, pretty much covering the whole gamut of all kinds of racing. I haven't actually done too much racing. My team, of course, Braden Richards went down to uh, where is that town again? Not
Paul Bash
Vinton.
was Tipton.
Yeah, the fall. Anyway, went to the fall bash. Ended up winning there on Saturday. That was pretty cool. So that was pretty neat. McBurney's new car, second night out on it, it was pretty good. Him and Tom Barry raced side by side for about 15 laps. So I watched it on IMCA TV and good racing. There a lot of race cars down there and good show. The racetrack was excellent. I mean, it was, and that's kind of what Braden and Bobby both said today that the racetrack was smooth as glass the whole weekend, and so that was pretty cool. So tell me about Deer Creek and your pavement stuff.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple weeks for us. We had the fall jamboree there at Deer Creek, which was an awesome event. Weather for both events all weekend was unbelievable. It might have been the best jamboree weather ever, and then carried it right into Oktoberfest, the best Oktoberfest weather ever. So it's pretty awesome to have the fall specials and not have to battle the elements. That's part of the fall is the elements, but it was definitely a good couple weekends. And Deer Creek, the racing was excellent. A last lap pass in the mod race Saturday night for the win was really exciting. And yeah, we had a lot of fun there. And then this past weekend was the Oktoberfest, so I was at the Oktoberfest, the local asphalt show here, and that went really good. They had also beautiful weather and a lot of cars, and we set up there for the first time in I think 15 years, and it went pretty good. And sold a bunch of stuff, and then the other FS2, the factory support crew number two, was in Missouri at Lucas Oil Speedway for the USRA Nationals, and that went good. So we've been pounding the pavement pretty hard. I think the boys are all worn out, and I asked if they wanted to go anywhere this weekend, and I got a lot of no's. So I think we're taking a couple weeks off.
Yeah,
But that's what we live for. We love to get to the track and see the customers, and that's where the products are made, and that's where the products are sold, and that's all part of it.
yeah. And you got a young team, and you're not super old yet either, so you got to enjoy it while you can. There will come a point in time where the IMCA TV is not such a bad thing. I mean, they do a good job. They have good interviews, and I just enjoyed being home, hung out with the dog, and watched some good racing.
Now, did you get the new stock RO too, or no?
Supposed to have it a week from, or well, we got it back from the powder coat today. It is supposed to debut next Monday on a test that we've got scheduled for it, and we've got some drivers coming down, going to actually give us their input on the car, and so we're going to do some other tests with a couple other drivers and who was modified and sport mod. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. That's going to be exciting. When I looked at it today, it doesn't look like it's in raceable condition, but the guys were pretty convinced that it would be by the time I see it next Monday morning. So, okay, sounds good to me. And those guys do an awesome job. And they were working late tonight on it, and when I left, and I got total faith that they'll make it happen. So that's going to be exciting. Everything turned out really neat. Some things are kind of unique. We kind of took the car, the way we actually built the car, we took a lot of ideas that, we've seen on some other chassis builder stuff that we're doing. And we didn't copy anybody's car, but B&B did make us the roll cage because our vendor, and we really don't have the facility to completely build a car from scratch, but we've got enough people that are willing to help us get parts made, and we can assemble them and make it pretty good. Jeffrey Jensen, any sport mod rules changes coming? Not that I've been aware of, Jeffrey. I have not heard anything. In fact, I actually haven't really heard anything about any real rule changes. At least there's nothing that sounds drastic or whatever. I mean, when you look at the Harris Clash, we had 236 cars. The Super Nationals, we had almost 1,100 cars or over 1,100 cars, whatever the case is. So it would be a little hard for me to suggest we need to fix something.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So,
Yeah, I know there's a couple USRA rule changes coming for 26. We built a spec right front lower control arm for the USRA B mod to replace the stock one. So they announced that last weekend at the USRA Nationals. It's a pretty cool deal to be the first one with that. So spec lower, same travel as a stock lower. So they didn't want any advantage to buying the fab lower versus the stock lower. So we had to change our design a little bit to make it to where it hits the frame at the same point a stock one is. So otherwise there'd be a distinct advantage to go to a fab lower to get the extra travel and get the right front corner down and turning better. So we're excited about that. That is one rule change we know for next year for the USRA B mods.
good. So what's the retail price on that A-frame going to be?
$295.
Yeah, so basically, it's about. I think that's kind of what I mean. Some people are getting that or above for the stock lower. I think our
Yeah,
price is. I'm pretty sure our price is right, either 285 or 295 for the stock lower.
yeah, yeah. The hope is that we would outlast the stock lower.
Right, and that's the downside to that stock lower. I mean, you hit a couple bumps and you bottom it out a couple 3 times, and the part that's attached to the spindle keeps going upward when everything else stops, and well, you know what happens then? Something's going to bend,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I could see where that could be a definite improvement, something that has a little bit more life to it, save those guys some money. So you're probably getting ready for deer season then.
Yeah, it's time to get in the woods. Need a couple weeks off. Yeah. How
Yeah.
about the schools? You getting some people signed up for the schools?
Yeah, actually, we had about 5 people sign up today. I think 2 of them were for the stock car school, and 3 of them were for the sport mod school. And we've actually had a fair amount of interest in the four-link school, which is a little rare this early for that particular school. So yeah, it's all going really good, and looking forward to another season of schools. In fact, I dug out the book, the sport mod or the tooling book last Friday and laid it on my desk, thinking, well, I should just probably start working on this. And the school thing's a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it's still a lot of fun and enjoy working with all the customers. In fact, I was actually gonna, I need to see if we still have that email. I need to forward that email to you because we had a guy that went to the four-link school that had not really raced much and really complimented the school and all the stuff that he learned and how much better he was this year from last year. He still wasn't a front runner, but he was competitive this year. And so he was excited about that. Yeah, full page letter. It was pretty interesting.
Awesome.
All right, Matt. Hey, guys, right rear on a Midwest Modified. I run a 13-inch spring right now, and I was curious on what a 16-inch spring on the right rear would do. Well, the big problem, Matt, you'd raise your spring table. Um, I myself wouldn't probably be a super big fan of that choice, just because of that factor that you really you start putting the 16-inch in the right rear, and then all of a sudden the spring table is kind of all out of whack. I'm afraid I would be a little leery that it might be inconsistent on how it rolls on the right rear just because of the spring table. What's your thoughts, Chad?
Well, if it's a Midwest mod, I'm curious if it's on a slider. If it's slider both
Yeah, then it
sides,
wouldn't matter.
then the height of the spring doesn't matter. Then you look at the taller spring, the 16-inch. I feel acts softer. Like if you had a 200-inch, or you had a 200-inch, you had a 200-pound 16-inch and a 200-pound 13-inch. I feel like the taller springs act like a softer spring just because they don't start to coil bind as soon as a shorter spring. So that also means that the rebound rate's going to be less, kind of like the tight helix, where they're super close together and it gets a rate to that coil bind point, and then the unload rate and speed is faster. So if anything, I would say, oh yeah, yes, both on slider
Slider,
both
both are
sides.
sliders, yeah. Yeah, then it
Well, then I
wouldn't
would say
affect the spring table.
not going to affect the spring table. I'd say it'd probably just act a little softer. There are a lot of guys that they think that just putting a shorter spring on a coilover makes a difference on the spring table, but all the engineering minds say no.
Frank, USRA modified, when get back into the throttle, phase two all feels like the whole car lifts instead of staying planted in a dynamic. Any thoughts? Thank you. Um, what's your thoughts on that, Chad?
Oh, pull bar car, I assume.
Yeah, because it's a USRA modified.
Yep. Um, yeah, generally, if it lifts when you get back to the throttle, that's probably too much drive angle or roll steer. I know that too much left bottom rod will act like a jack to pick the car up, and sometimes it can be drastic too much. So there's probably a few variables there that might be the situation. Like if there's too much angle on the rods, it could pick up. Oh, lift arm. Yeah.
Lift arm car. Oh, that would explain it. Um, that's kind of a typical, I mean, a little typical. I'm not saying that it can't be fixed, but I'm not sure I would know what to tell you because I really don't have a whole lot of lift arm car experience, but I do know that the lift arm car has a tendency to take weight off the front end rather than, it tries to I mean, it lifts the front and tries to transfer it to the back, which makes the front end light.
My guess would be to move the spring, the fifth coil spring, back so it's not
Yeah.
so far forward. Pick the front up so easy. Um, if you have that adjustment.
Yeah, and maybe go 25 pounds stiffer on the spring because of course when you shorten it, you might
Need more
you might
rate.
get too much travel with a softer spring, so and then, that wouldn't help you either.
Well, what else is going on? You got a bunch of shocks coming in for the winter. Maybe tell everybody what to do for winter storage. And
Well, believe it or not, Friday we actually had quite a few boxes of shocks come in, which was I was quite surprised because usually Fridays are a little bit quieter this time of the year, and of course Bobby was gone and Braden was gone, and UPS man dropped off a half a truckload of shock boxes, and so we just piled them in the shock room. Like, well, here you go, guys, when you get here. Uh, Biggest thing is, you need to start thinking about. I know racing season just got done, and it's kind of like everything. You sort of need a break, but after a little bit, you're gonna, the weather's gonna start turning a little cooler, and pretty soon you're gonna want to work in the heated garage. So you might as well work on your race car. We've got that long list of and I actually need to put that on our website, that long list of things that you do over the winter to refurbish your car and start getting it ready. And shocks are one of them. Make sure you store your shocks in a heat controlled environment. They don't need to be out in cold weather. And, I keep them as expensive as shocks are. It's very important to keep good control over them. And, it's always a good idea. I know we probably have some specials coming up, rebuild specials coming up, some freight deals maybe. I'm not really sure what the shock department's got up their sleeve, but watch for that. And we'll have some posts about it. But now's a great time to get everything freshened up and start your 2026 season. Like I said, I realize some of you guys are still racing. There's still quite a few races going on. I know there's a race. I think it's in 2 weeks at Makokata, uh, and that's always an excellent show. And I think 3 weeks. No, maybe it's in 2 weeks is at Makokata. Yeah, it's in 2 weeks in Makokata, and then 3 weeks is Marshalltown. They've got a 3-day event there. So there's still lots of racing going on. We're hoping to be able to run the new stock car at both those events, depending on how testing and everything goes on Monday. So, but it's time to, like I said, don't just throw it in your trailer and leave it all dirty and you know just kind of start thinking of things that you can do to prep for the next season. And we'll start on these shows. We'll start going through some of that stuff. I've had that list laying on my desk for gosh knows how long, and I don't know, something spurred me to clean my desk off a couple 3 weeks ago. I don't know what I did with that list. Probably filed it in some logical file in my cabinet here. What the logic would be, I might have to think about that. Curtis, IMCA mod, would you increase or decrease load in the left rear spring in the slick? And would you increase spring rate or go softer? Just curious. Um, you know, what's your thoughts on that, Chad?
It's kind of a double-edged sword. Like I feel like I would take some wedge out, as long as your
Yeah,
car turns. You don't need to use the wedge to rotate into the corner. The downside is that the pace slows down, right? So it's kind of touchy because you want the exit traction, you want the softer spring, but you also need the motion when the track gets slower. So it's tough. I generally, I don't like to mess with the left rear load just for that reason because it's so vital on corner entry, and the little bit of benefit you get on the left rear from on exit because you're at attitude and the car's at full hike and the drive angle is taken over on the left rear. So I mean, I don't like doing that change just for that reason because it affects entry more than it does exit. So I would probably pick something else to work on for the slick.
yeah, I would completely agree with Chad because when it gets dry, slick, side biting that right rear is key, man. I mean, it's just you gotta have drive in the right rear. People think you gotta overload the left rear, which actually the problem is you put more load in that left rear, it's gonna actually make the car freer on corner entry, just like what Chad just said. And the car's gonna kind of get skatey getting in. Well, then once it starts that skating motion, and it doesn't have to be much of a skate, just a little bit. And once it breaks traction, all you did to help it traction actually killed it. You lost what you were doing. So yeah, I would caution you on that change. I would leave my left rear alone. A mod world, how often would we maintenance our pull bar, dirt star one? Well, you're probably going to want to actually talk to those guys. In my opinion, I don't, if I'm racing and I'm wanting to run up front, I'm maintenance that pull bar a lot. That you know, we run a pull bar of Chad's that's similar to that Dirt Star deal, and every 5 nights we take it apart, clean it, and of course, we can put the bushings in the load machine, or we can put it in the load machine and see if the bushings have started to fail. Usually, the bushings will last 20 nights, but I still clean it all up, make sure it's moving free, it's got fresh grease in there, and service it because it's such a key traction part of your equation. Um, Robert, when installing lower trailing arm mounts on a metric rear end, do you set pinion angle and then weld them on? Yes. Definitely, you want to set the pinion angle to whatever pinion angle you're going to run. Some guys run 5 degrees, some guys run 7. On a stock car, 7's probably the max I would go. 5's probably more realistic just because keep in mind that they just don't move that much. And but it's important because if you don't do that, then when you put it in the car, then the pinion angle's all out of whack. So it's very important, Robert, to do that. You know, we have a jig that we do all that in, but it's still important when you weld them up to make sure you set the pinion angle first. Vic, on the left rear on a modified the brake floater rod underneath going forward, how does it hold the car up? If the brake rod goes towards the rear of the car, I understand how it may work. How long of a bar do you need and what angle for the forward bar? Thank you. I'll let you answer that question, Chad.
So, I mean, the reason that it works is it's pull, all it has to do when you activate the brake is pull the rear end underneath the car. So it's just pulling the rear end forward, which activates the four link rods, which picks the car up. So when your when your brake floater arm goes up to the frame, then it has to pick up more of the load. It's more trying to push the car up than it is just pulling the rear end forward. So it's just a different way to do it. It's a little bit more effective just because it doesn't have to move as much weight. The when you're clamped to the suspension cage or you have the top rod on and you're pushing up towards the frame, you're trying to pick the whole car up. Whereas the underside one, you're just pulling the rear end forward, and it's usually a really fast motion. Um, as far as the angle, I don't know an exact angle. I know they're putting it on that bottom rail underneath the seat, and then they're in I think the 5.5 hole on the brake floater side.
Um, okay. Then Cody wants to know, then spring wise, how often should I replace those in the mod world? I've got lots to learn in this mod world. Now Cody's still talking about the pull bar spring.
Yeah.
Um, that spring's good for 20 nights. Um, it might even go longer than that. I mean, they're not moving a lot, so we're not getting violent action in the spring. I mean, it does get quick movement, but and it's a fairly light spring, so it's still going to wear out sooner. But you know, 20, 25 nights on that spring is probably, I replaced the spring when I replaced the bushings. Um, Kyle, IMCA stock car. I have about an inch of spring table left to right, 16-inch left rear spring with the flat OD cup, 13-inch right rear spring with the 3-inch OD cup. Is there any positive good, or is that number that is good a good ballpark? I don't want to have to run a shorter right rear spring. Well, I agree with you, Kyle. I would not be in favor of a shorter right rear spring. I think you got it dialed in. I mean,
Yeah.
an inch is good. I never like to go over 2 inches because I think it gets too erratic. So I like that inch to inch, between an inch and 2 inch movement difference. That sounds really good. Um, Jeremiah, hey guys, we are on a 6,500 pound or 6,500 RPM rule where we are 486 ring and pinion. It seems to hit the chip a tad early. We won 4 races, but we're thinking of going to the 412 or the 411 to get further into the corner, but able to get off. Example, a 534, what runs in the feature hitting the chip about 4 car lengths before entry. If we go to a 528, just can't get off the corner like we'd like to. With the 412, we could go to a 532 or a 530. Would you make that change? Just seems like we either have too much or not enough. To me, that sounds like a fine change, but I could be wrong. I think, I think that's so close that I don't know if you could tell the difference. The advantage to running a 480 or the 411 ring and pinion is there's more gear choices, um, which is a typical deal, especially like with a crate motor. So you can get, if you're running big racetracks, you can get better gear ratios up in the 486 range. Uh, that's what I've been told and what I know about the quick change. I don't think 2 points in gear is going to be a life or death deal, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I would talk to your engine builder. Um, he's the one that's going to, be able to tell you a little bit more. A lot of times, if you're hitting the chip a little early, you can actually start braking the car with the brakes, which kind of keeps it from hitting the chip poorly, but it allows it to run into the corner a little bit better. And then you still have that power to come off or the quickness to come off. But driving wise, you can kind of manipulate how that car hits the chip when it does hit the chip. Rick said Curtis was a great question. Um, regular springs in the car, not pull bar. Oh, regular springs in the car. Left rear spring, maximum 10 nights. Um, the rest of the springs, the right front, it takes a tremendous amount of abuse. I wouldn't run it. I would be nervous about running a right front spring more than 20 nights. Right rear doesn't really get that much movement. You could probably run it twice as long as you run the right front. And the left front, it gets a lot of load for a very short instance. Um, and it just basically loads the car on corner entry. Otherwise, there's not a lot of load on that spring. So that spring could last a half a season. Uh, Due to the cost of springs in relationship to the cost of tires, I replace the left rear often, and then probably the second time I replace the left rear, I replace the other three, just making sure that we're keeping up on stuff. The spring companies will tell you they have a lifetime warranty. Um, I don't
The
know whose
shockers.
lifetime that actually is, but Adam, USRA B-Mod, when the track gets slick, would lowering the right rear bar help plant the right rear tire? Would leaving it up be more beneficial? Say 10 to 12 degrees at static. Well, 10 degrees at static is going to help the car rotate better, but it's not probably going to come off as good because we're almost getting too much angle on that right rear tire. I would probably lean more towards something around 7 degrees when the racetrack gets real slick. We play with that right rear quite a bit. Uh, I don't. I We used to years ago. We ran that thing flat. The problem was the car would get so tight on corner entry. Well, then once when the car gets tight, the driver's going to turn it, no matter what he has to use to turn it. Well, what do you think he has to use to turn it? It's the throttle pedal. Well, once you take that throttle pedal and try to turn the car on a slick racetrack, you're going to bust traction, and then everything's going to kind of turn to crap. So you still got to have steer in that right rear, but 5 degrees is I wouldn't go lower than 5 degrees, but I don't think I'd run more than 7 on a real slick racetrack. And it depends on the racetrack. If it's a real tight corner racetrack where you got to really turn in good and rotate good, you can put some static lead in the car to, take some of the roll steer out of the car to help get it off the corner and still have the angle in there. You just got to make that determination on the actual racetrack that you're running. Chad, do you make an adapter for your suspension measuring plate that would work for the front tie rods on a sport mod, since one end has a stock tie rod and not a Heim?
Yeah, that's been on our list for a long time, and I'll see if I can't get that pushed up the ladder a little bit. One of the things that you're always setting the toe on the car on the ground, but it would be nice to have, like if your right front bent one was set the same all the time, and then you set the toe on the ground, with your left front, or so you could set the bent ones and have them identical all the time. So I will definitely get that moved up the ladder a little bit here if we can.
Well, do you know somebody then that you can talk to about
And I used to think I had all the pull in the world.
that?
Now there's some sort of a schedule. I don't know.
Oh, jeez.
They kicked me out of the machine shop for a reason because I have visions, and then we stopped production for a vision, and that's bad. So
Mm.
that's why.
Luke, great advice last week on the strange axles. I replaced my old ones and the car had much better drive. Picked up the first win out with the new ones. Well, congratulations, Luke. That's awesome.
Awesome.
I'll tell you what, that's just another thing that a lot of people miss because we don't think about it. You put them axles in at the beginning of the year, and unless they break, why would you even think about it? I mean, the only time you deal with it is you pull the left rear when you're scaling the car. Now, however, if the left rear has a line on it, when you pull it, when you're scaling the car, you can easily pull it out and make sure that it's not twisted. But yeah, the life of those, I mean, they're just a torsion piece, so they're just not going to last forever. But
I was at
congratulations on
the
the win. That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Um,
was at the asphalt track last week, and somebody told me that the manufacturers are putting a line on the axles new now. Some of them,
are
so
they?
it's about
Well, that's a
time.
good deal. I mean, I know when we get the axles in, we actually put them on your roller machine and put a yellow paint strip on it and then put it back in the box and send them to the customer that way so that I know that there's a line on that axle instead of telling somebody to do it and relying on the fact that that's all going to happen. Jeremiah, my engine is a CT 525. Awesome. So you're pretty stuck with that 6,500 RPM rule then. Um, Cody, like front and rear, how often to change those?
That's the
Um,
spring question again. Same thing.
okay,
We covered it. Yeah.
we covered it. Thomas, good starting scale numbers for a rookie IMCA stock car driver with hobby stock and sport mod experience. Rear percentage and how much bite. Well, the bite deal, that's a number that's just all over the board. I mean, we've got guys that run a tremendous amount. We got guys that don't run a whole lot. In my opinion, the cars, due to the fact that those cars are a little bit sketchy on side bite to begin with, I don't recommend a lot of left rear bite in those cars. 125 pounds. I, I don't think I'd really ever, 100 to 125 pounds. I don't think I'd go over that. I know there's guys out there that run a whole lot more than that. Um, and I'm not saying that that's not, I mean, if they've got a way of figuring out how to make it successful for themselves, that's great. You're asking my opinion. Rear percentage, rear percentage on a stock car is just like everything else. If you can get more, the better you are. The downside to the way the engine rules state that in these cars with a lot of the stock components, these cars can tend to be a touch on the heavy side with not having a lot of rear percent, where they're around 54. I think they need to be up to 56, but then God, do I want to give somebody 200 pounds? But then again, a heavier race car that's capable of coming off the corner, mm, I'd do what the driver's comfortable with. Um, Sean, IMCA modified. What effect does moving the right side bar up and down do? Great question for our four-link expert.
Well, moving it up is gonna to make the car freer or give it more spring stiffness, if you will. Moving it down will make it softer and make the car kind of lay over there. So it's a balancing act between roll and spring stiffness. So sometimes later in the night you'd take a little angle out, and early in the night you'd put a little angle in.
Yeah, the thing that I've found when you take some of the angle out, you kind of can risk the car because, like Chad said, you're going to lose a little bit of spring stiffness when you do that, which is actually suspension stiffness. But it kind of makes the car can be a little lazy. Now it's going to get off the corner better, but in the center of the corner, phase two of the corner, it can be just a little lazy. So you kind of got to judge the fact that am I faster in phase two so I can give up a little in phase three, or where would I be better off? Is that a deal where this is just plain a drag race deal, and I just need to have the most amount of power and forward traction up off the corner? So then you kind of decide, because I mean, that, if it's laying over there a little bit on the right rear, the driver can kind of drive around that. I mean, it's not a huge issue one way or the other. Um, Adam, USRA BMOD, final race of the year. The track had a lot of character. I lengthened the right rear chain out a quarter of an inch to get the right rear to travel the bumps better. Did I take load out of the right rear? If so, should I have put rounds in the right rear to get back to the same amount of load? Uh, I don't think you took load out, because if you're loading the right rear against the chain, that's a risky deal to begin with, especially on a racetrack that has a lot of character. Um, that the right rear chain is really sensitive, and you'll hear guys, and you can hear this, especially, of course, I go to Boone a lot because it's only 36 minutes from my house. Well, you can hear a lot of guys come up off the corner with the sport mod, and all of a sudden you hear them, woo, 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 woo. Well, and if you watch the right rear, the actual right rear is actually hopping because they've got the chain too tight. And so what's happening is it's not allowing the car to have its free movement, because when you get under traction, the right rear actually needs to gain angle to give you traction on the right rear. And if you restrict that angle, it makes the left rear work better, but I don't think it makes the car faster. I'm not a fan at all of putting right rear chain in anything. Earl, 14 GRT ride heights. Have you played with lowering or raising them? We definitely have lowered them down. Now the ride height that we use, we measure from the lower A-frame control arm bolt to the level surface or the ground or whatever the case is. And the GRT original measurements were actually fairly high. And we actually, I think our right front is like 7 1/4, and our left front now is 7 3/8. Getting that front end down seems to just, I don't know. I just like the way the car drives better with the front end down on the ground. Excuse me. Um,
You missed Cody.
I missed Cody. IMCA stock car. What effect does free roll steer have on the car, and should it be used? What do you mean by what does he mean by free roll steer?
I'd say longer on the right, shorter on the left, like set up to be free.
Um, that works really well getting into the corner and through the middle of the corner. And that's again, same as that question earlier. If you gain enough speed getting through the middle of the corner or phase two of the corner to the point where you can sacrifice a little bit of traction off the corner, then I think it's a good idea. However, it's a real, if your driver's one of them guys that, he's a hammered down, then you got to be a little careful not putting too much water in it, because he's going to want the rear end to be straighter coming off the corner. This fly's not going to live. Haven't had flies down here for a week. Now, of course, tonight I got a fly. Anyway, Matt, on a Midwest Modified, should the rear end, right rear hub straight line in line with the right front? No. The right rear should be inside the right front, because that's just going to give you more side bite, and then it allows the right front to have more control over steering the car and making the car turn and rotate like you want it to. If you get the right rear out or even with it, it can actually make it to the point where the right rear tries to start steering the car. And then all of a sudden it's up to the driver on how he drives the car because the car can be kind of finicky loose. Um, okay. Right lower on an IMCA stock car. What does it do moving it up? I've heard mixed reviews, so we haven't tried it. The right rear, when you move it up, you're going to take steer out of the car and you're going to put drive in the car. The downside when you take steer out of the car is it can make the car a little tight in the center of the corner. So then all of a sudden, when it gets tight in the center of the corner, you tend to break the tires loose. So then it didn't help you by raising it up on the rear end and taking angle out of it because now all of a sudden you've got a tight condition. So it's all about the amount of steer that's in the car and how the car rotates. And the biggest thing with these IMCA cars that the tire does not like to be spun, does not like to be slid. You just have to, it's kind of like pavement racing. You just have to take good care of your tires. The old theory of putting the pedal to the metal coming off the corner and think it's going to eventually catch traction doesn't necessarily work with those tires. On a Midwest modified, should the right rear hub, did I,
It's a
did
repeat.
I,
That's he repeated it. Yeah, it came in twice.
Bob, can you enter the corner in the wrong place and create a tight or loose problem? Maybe the setup is right, but the driver's entering wrong. Totally. Uh, my famous one, I had this one driver complained about his car pushing all the time. Well, he would chop the corner getting in. So in other words, he'd go down the straightaway, cut to the bottom of the racetrack, and try to hit that tractor tire getting into the corner. Well, the problem is if he would have moved up one car width, the whole car would have rotated and he could have turned it down to get down where he wanted to be rather than because what's happening is now he's kind of making a diamond in the corner and that right front tire can't hang on to it. It won't, it just won't turn. So, in pavement back when we were when I was working with Brett Moffitt and all that, that was the biggest thing is open up the corner, let the car roll, let the car roll on its own on corner entry. And then once you're into the corner, the car should be set up where you can drive it however you want to or however your driver wants to drive it. But if he's chopping the corner, now the other scenario is the guy that goes in and he's clear up against the cushion on corner entry. Well, that looks good. It's a pretty sight. Not necessarily always going anywhere, and some guys do make it work as long as they don't misjudge how the right front grabs that cushion and jumps the cushion, sticks the cross member in the dirt, and now they drop 5 spots because the car stopped. So it just let that car roll in on its own. Just let the car will drive itself getting into the corner. Trust me, it will. We've got stagger in the car. We've got all these things to make the car do what it's supposed to do. The car will drive itself getting in. Your setup needs to work in the center of the corner and the driver for that driver. What's your thoughts on that, Chad?
Yeah, I agree 100%. The one of the things that I see a lot is when drivers are in traffic and they're trying to pass a guy. When you're trying to make a move on the guy in front of you, you see so many times that a guy will try and dive bomb his entry and get under that guy, and then he's really tight in the middle because he didn't enter right, and then he's loose off, and he's in a frustrated battle with that guy. And so many times you see that driver and they don't get the job done, they don't pass that guy, and then they're like, "Oh, I had no traction, I couldn't even pass him." Well, part of the problem was you were dive bombing too low, and you were making the car tight in the middle, and then you were throttling it trying to keep up with him. I see that all the time, and it is intensified on asphalt too, but it does happen dirt racing also, and that's it's such a strategy when you're trying to pass that guy that you can't assume you got to dive underneath him. You got to follow him into the corner in the same line or even a half a car length above,
Above, yeah.
so that you can. The goal is to get under him off the corner and beat him to the next corner, not dive bomb into the next corner.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect that I see a lot of that, where guys are they're trying to pass a guy and they're too aggressive too late down the straightaway, and you got to think about that move the lap before and try and play that entry so you can get under that guy off the corner.
Very seldom do you see somebody pass somebody getting into the corner and do it respectfully.
That's where most of the crashes happen.
Yes.
dive
Many
bomb,
times
dive bomb.
I've been where, um, Sean, in an IMC outfit, having a hard time getting the load number in the right front and keeping the ride height down. Will the 2-inch drop cup help with that? What's your thoughts, Chad? The drop cup's
No,
not
the
going to
drop.
help.
No, if you're trying to run too soft of a spring, you're never going to get the ride height unless you can chain the car. If you can run a chain and you can pre-wind a soft spring into a chain to hold the ride height, to hold the roll center, that's lights out. That we were doing that in IMCA. There was that 5-6 years ago when you could run a
Oh,
chain.
yeah.
Them things were pre-wound into that chain. They were like a go-kart. Man, did they turn and have traction. But they took that away, and the car has to come up, when it's sitting there at ride height. So it's super tough to do a soft spring and maintain your ride height if that's what you're trying to do. I'm against that 100%, especially dirt racing. You got a soft spring in there, and you're running bump stops, and you hit a bump, and you KO it, and you wreck the lower, and you wreck all this stuff. And not a huge fan of the soft spring package on dirt.
Earl, J-bar on a quick change. Pinion side center above or below the pinion. What's your thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, you got to be. I'd say 80% of the world is center line or 1 inch above. I would say.
Yeah. Very seldom do we ever see going much below zero, maybe a quarter of an inch, but that zero number seems to be really pretty solid. Kyle, also, you guys are dirt racing interviews, although not typical in sprint cars, but rest in peace, Bobby Allen, great racer and great dirt racer and innovator. Yes, most definitely. Jeffrey said, well said, Chad. I totally agree with you. But Chad said so many nice, good things here. Which one was he talking about? Okay, John, having a hard time getting forward drive and side bite in a 15 Skyrocket. I would probably highly recommend calling Kelly Shryak and talk to him. He's going to be your main guy for information about that particular car. And, good race cars, they do a great job. Side bite can be a Panhard type of deal. Forward bite, that can be kind of a pull bar type of deal. And I don't have the knowledge of what they actually run or what you run in those cars. Left rear spring, Once again, I'm not sure what they recommend for their left rear spring package. I know a lot of guys are in that 80 to 100 range uh, with with some preload in it, those type of things. But I'd call Kelly. He would be. He's excellent at helping people, and he's the man to answer those questions. Um, Sean says it's a 500-pound spring. Well, that's actually not too stiff. I mean, not too
No,
soft.
that's not. Yeah.
500, that's our normal right front spring, pretty much in everything that we sport mod and modified.
I mean, I don't know
John,
if you're searching for a magical down number. Is that what you're trying to achieve? Is a magical down number? I don't know. Then it's going to be hard to manipulate. Sometimes you have to change spring manufacturers or something like that to manipulate that down number a little bit. So I would look at that possibly.
Jeffrey's got a good question. Driver entry. Once again, that whole driver entry thing is so crucial. Um, and it doesn't matter if you're driving a go-kart, a stock car, a modified, a pavement car. I mean, how the driver drives the car into the corner is going to make all the difference in the world. What's going to happen in phase two and phase three. John says that's an IMCA modified, but yeah. Well, I mean, Kelly runs one every week, so like I said, he would. He's definitely your guy for information, and he knows those cars very well because he builds them. So that's why he should know them. Well, we've got about 3 minutes for a couple questions. Our next show is going to be October 20th, so we'll have some more races to talk about, which is going to be a good thing. That's always exciting. Hopefully, Chad will get a couple deer by that point in time, him and his boys, and we'll have some of that stuff to discuss. And Joe, if a car has 6 degrees pinion angle, how much rear end rotation would be optimal using a pull bar and non-bird cages? Well, I still don't think you run. I mean, I don't think a pull bar needs to move over an inch. Um, the pull bar, all the pull bar needs to do is help get the traction started because your two lower links are your traction links to keep it going. And once the car's up on the bars, that's actually where the traction is coming from. I mean, the pull bar is definitely helping, but the pull bar basically helps traction get started, and that makes a big difference. Jesse, turnaround time for a mod roller, 2026 specs. Well, we're out a ways. For some reason or another, we're having a terrific year selling race cars, which is not. In the last couple of years, this early hasn't been that the case. So I would actually have to look on a calendar, but I would have to say a mod roller, we're probably 8 to 10 weeks out. But if you're thinking about one, I would definitely strongly consider getting on a list because, well, today's October 6th. I mean, this falls went fast, and it's not going to be long where it's going to be Thanksgiving Day. And Joey, we do not have bear packages on the stock car. Our bare chassis package on the modified or the sport mod would be powder coated frame with the interior in it. All right, it's 8 o'clock. Once again, you guys had some excellent questions. I really appreciate it. It was a great show tonight. Very good questions. I was very, very impressed. So everybody have a good weekend. Hopefully everybody's still racing and having some fun. Maybe they're going hunting like Chad. But whatever you're going to do, have a great time doing it. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks, Chad.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.